word just means to make things big and exciting and amazing. And, you know, that is a valid definition. But I also need to think about that it referring to anything relating to the theater. So that way, and like that's good to think about, because any choices can be big or small, and they can both have big impacts. Just because someone is doing big, crazy movements, that doesn't mean that they're doing a better job or being a better actor than someone who spends time on the little things. It's both. And the way to really make something theatrical isn't doing this crazy big, over-the-top performance or anything like that. It's simply to go in front of an audience. There's this big theory that something only becomes theatrical when it's in front of an audience. Now, personally, as an actor, I have my own gripes with that, you know, like, but when I go over to my room, I'm giving it my all, so it must be a performance, but you also have to think that in those moments, you are embodying the character. You aren't performing, you are being. And so, that's one of those things where, you know, you can personally have your gripes with, but it's good to just know. And when it comes to setting your scene, it's important to have suspense and anticipation. You want your audience to hang on to every word, to know what it is that's going to happen next. And the easiest way to do that is through defamiliarization. Now, we as humans, we love things that are normal, things that are comfortable. And just to change little things, make things just slightly unnatural, little just things that just don't seem right, can make things so much more interesting. So if you had, you know, Macbeth, you took Macbeth and placed it in, you know, we all have that idea of it just being like old and knights with swords, but if you placed it in somewhere else, and like, I know a lot of people dog on the Romeo and Juliet movie, because, you know, it wasn't executed very well, but that, as a concept of just taking something and changing it to make it more, to just add that sense of unfamiliarity. And that's a big one. You can just do little things, like if your set's made out of wood, it doesn't need to look like wood. You can paint it to look like brick and stone and all these things. These are just little things that you can do to change what you have to make something new and make something different. And you can play with sizes and genres and all kinds of things. Let me just slide over here into the next thing, shall we? Next thing I want to talk about is dramatical space versus theatrical space. And I would like to apologize for this slideshow being rather, this slide is rather bare, but the whole thing is rather simple, just because that's not my bread and butter. But it's important to know the difference and to know how you can use each one to your advantage. So theatrical space is the space you're in. So, for example, this room, we have the stage over there, the lights above. It's good to think about, it's easy to think about in relation to your limitations. I know I can only come out so far. I know the spotlight is here, there's light there, and stuff like that. It's good to know things like that. But when it comes to the dramatic space, none of that stuff matters. The dramatic space is the scene itself. You know, I can step out on the stage and be on the stage and do Hamlet, but I'm not really on a stage. I'm in Denmark. I am Hamlet. This is the space that's become. So it's important to know the difference. And anything can be a theatrical space, and any theatrical space can convey any number of dramatic spaces. Like here is just like in relation to just actual like theater and different buildings and stuff. These are like the common theaters. So the end on proscenium arch, which is like the really big ones, and thrust. And this one I really like. I really love to work in the round where you have everyone on all different sides of you, and you have to act at 365 degrees. These are all examples of theatrical spaces. Sorry. And you can have any number of dramatic experiences and any number of scenes and things take place in the same room, but a gajillion different ways. And you can it's to know that just because you're in this black room with the stage and the lights, that you can really do whatever you want with the space. All right, now I want to talk about theatrical conventions. This is it's another like simple. It can be kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but once you get it, it makes sense. So when you go into a theater, you know that you don't walk up on the stage. You just go and you find your seat, you sit down. You don't really talk. You let the actors do the talking. We know those things because those are conventions. Those are almost unspoken rules that have been put in place that make things make sense. It's things that we understand, things we can put aside to truly enjoy the theater. And you can break that as well to add defamiliarization. So up next I have a list of a couple different conventions. So things like slow motion and tableau and stuff like that, that like, if I was talking to someone and all of a sudden I come over here and start insulting them, well clearly in real life, they'd be able to hear me easily. But because we're in this performance space and because you have to use those, you can take in those conventions and use them, the audience isn't willing to accept that person can't hear. Because these are just like unspoken rules and things that you just come to accept. They're just things that help make things better. And you can break these and you can play with these. If you want, you can have a show where the audience is, all over the place, and you can do a show where the audience is on the stage and the performers are performing in the seats. Like these are just little things that make so much interest. And you don't have to do this. You can just do your normal, audience in the chairs and performers on the stage. But these are just things to think about. And that's really what I'm hoping to get across, is that these are just things that you can think to do differently. Like when Sir does Nicodemus, he does a thing where he puts the parts of the performers in the audience, and then they will come in and will shout out at the performers. And now it's everyone else in the audience. That is weird. That's different. That's interesting, because the audience isn't meant to speak, and it definitely isn't meant to yell out at the performers. Again, cases where that's the norm, but for the most part, that's weird, and so that adds interest. And I want to talk about objectivity versus subjectivity. This is about being precise and knowing what you want. Because anything can be, you can have a perfect image and idea of what you want in your head, and it can be so clear to you. But an audience member might have a completely different interpretation, and you can't tell them they're wrong. Like, it's art, it's meant to be enjoyed and thought about. It's not to tell them they're wrong. So it's important to know that just what you think may be objective truth may not be correct. Like, I was talking about earlier in production. There's this play, and the whole thing was set inside this giant plywood box. And, perhaps the director was just like, I don't want to do a set, so we're just gonna do a big box and, done. We'll call it in. There's our set. But an audience member can look at it like, oh, it's about how they're trapped and all this stuff, and how they're trapped in their own little worlds. It's so deep, and they can come up with those things, and you can't tell them they're wrong. And you might think, and they're like, yeah, that is a good point. That's a good way to look at it. It's knowing that people are going to change things. Just what you think may not always be set in stone. And another point, this is a point more about consuming theater and things like that. But also when talking about things and describing things, it's important to be objective. Because I could look at this and I could be like, oh, he's dressed like it's a ringleader from a circus. He's a circus ringleader, and all this things. First and foremost, this is not a circus ringleader. This is Androas from Wings Up. So he's a freedom fighter. He's not like that. So, but if I described him as he was wearing this white shirt and this red vest with all these orange, the golden epaulette kind of things all down the side, that immediately puts an exact picture in your mind. Because say he was a circus leader, and I said, hey Toby, you should have seen the play last night. The guy was dressed just like a circus ringleader. Well, these are all circus ringleaders. I just Googled ringleader, and these are the top 3 images. So that doesn't, you have to be specific and know what you're talking about and make things clear. And again, this is more a point for consuming theater, but it's important to make choices that are clear to the audience, that they will be able to easily describe these things. Okay, we're almost done. Acting choices. This is very related to what we're going to be doing. I know this has been long. Acting can be broken down, to me personally, into 3 big choices: sound, mind, and body. Basically meaning that, I can speak, and I can make choices with my voice, and I can go like this, oh hello, and I can go way down there deep like this. And I can choose movement, and that's a lot of them you see in mine. You see these styles where they just use one part of it. So I can, be big and strong like this, and little and tiny. There's so much you can do. And, with theater, and what you'll be doing all 3. You'll be making these specific choices and these vocal choices, but also a third one, which is also super important. The fact that you can't do either of these without it is your subtext. You need to know, why you're doing things. And I know that's one of those things that you can be like, oh, it's so much work, it's so much stuff, but it really does make a difference. If you were doing a show and suddenly something went wrong, and you had to go off script and just come up with something, well now, you'll be benefited because you will know the ins and outs of your character. You will know what to do in that situation. That's a lot of performative artists, like people like Sacha Baron Cohen, so like Borat. That is what he does. He learns the ins and outs of his characters because he's not tied to a script. Any situation, he needs to know who he is, who his friends are, everything. He needs to be able to answer any question or do anything in character. It can be a lot of work. It can be a lot, but it's important.